Control your mouth, mood, money and mind. The man who cannot control his mouth will always speak weakness into existence. The one who cannot control his mood will destroy peace in moments of anger. Without control over your money, you'll always be a slave to circumstance. And without control of your mind, you'll be ruled by everything around you. Discipline is not about punishment, it's about power. Control these four: your words, your emotions, your money, your mind, and life will no longer pull you in every direction. Stay until the end, because the final piece is the one most men ignore, and that's why they never rise. Your mouth can build or break everything: your future, your relationships, your reputation. All of it can rise or fall with a single sentence. One careless phrase, one emotional reaction, one ego-driven outburst, and the trust you've been building for years can vanish in a moment. This is what most people don't understand. Your voice is not just a communication tool. It's a weapon. It's a mirror. It's a currency. Every time you speak, you either invest in your direction or you dilute it. You either add to your authority or subtract from it. That's why the first real discipline in becoming powerful, truly powerful, isn't physical. It's verbal. It's the ability to stay quiet when most people would panic to fill space. Real discipline begins with silence. Not silence as suppression. Not silence as fear. Silence as control. Silence as restraint. Silence as presence. The man who speaks less doesn't lack intelligence, he's refining it. Because when you don't speak by default, you begin to see what others miss. You start to observe the energy behind the words people say. You notice how often people speak out of insecurity, out of nervousness, out of the desire to be liked or approved. You see how much of what's being said is reactive, not intentional. And more importantly, you start to catch your own impulses. Your own urges to interrupt, to defend yourself, to justify your decisions, to appear clever or strong or wise. And once you become aware of those impulses, you can begin to rise above them. The untrained man speaks to prove. He spills his thoughts in every conversation. He argues every challenge. He explains his every move. Not because he's powerful, but because he's insecure. And insecurity always talks too much. It needs to be heard. It needs to be validated. But the trained man, the man who has faced himself, who has sat with his need to be right, his urge to be seen, his temptation to dominate, he chooses when to speak. He doesn't react to everything. He doesn't chase understanding. He doesn't fight for space, because his power is internal. His words are chosen, measured, aligned, and because of that, they land heavier. People feel them, because they come from a calm mind, and calm minds are rare. But a calm mind cannot exist in someone who always needs to be heard. The man who never stops talking never hears himself. He doesn't hear his thoughts. He doesn't feel his own nervous system. He doesn't realize when he's leaking energy, because he's too busy pushing outward to notice what's happening inside. And eventually that cost catches up. People start tuning out. Respect fades. Influence thins. He talks so much that his words lose weight, and when he finally does have something to say, no one listens. Because power is never found in volume. It's found in precision. So here's the rule. Every time you speak, ask yourself, does this build something? Am I building trust, building direction, building a standard, building clarity? Or am I just reacting? Am I defending my ego? Am I trying to get approval? Am I wasting words on people who don't value them? Next question, does this protect my energy? Is what I'm about to say going to pull me out of center? Is it going to create unnecessary drama, tension, or distraction? Or will it move the conversation, the moment, the mission forward? If the answer to either question is no, don't say it. This is not about becoming silent forever. It's about becoming surgical. Powerful men don't need to talk much. They speak when necessary, when purposeful, when impactful. Their words come from rooted energy, not scattered emotion. And because of that, their words carry force. They cut through noise. They settle tension. They don't entertain confusion, they resolve it. That's what your voice is meant for. Not just to be heard, but to lead, to align, to instruct, to bless, to defend, to end what needs to be ended, and to begin what needs to be born. But it all starts with discipline. And verbal discipline is the highest, most underrated form of strength. Most people can't hold it. They panic in silence. They feel invisible if they're not speaking. But when you master your mouth, you master your future. You speak less, and everything you say starts to build something. You waste less breath, and your energy gets sharper. Your thoughts get cleaner. Your impact expands. Because people start to realize when this man speaks, he means it. And that kind of presence, that kind of restraint, it builds a reputation that no amount of talking could ever create. So control your mouth, or your mouth will control your future. Your mood is not your master, but most people live as if it is. They wake up and let their feelings set the direction for the entire day. If they feel tired, they move slow. If they feel sad, they isolate. If they feel irritated, they lash out. Their emotions aren't observed, they're obeyed. And in that blind obedience, they lose something critical, authority over their own life. Because when your feelings dictate your actions, your discipline dies. And when discipline dies, so does direction. You are not your feelings. You have feelings. That distinction matters. Because the moment you believe that your emotion is your truth, you lose the ability to separate reaction from response. Anger isn't the problem. Sadness isn't the problem. Doubt, frustration, fear, none of them are the problem. The problem is identity. When you fuse with the emotion, when you make it who you are instead of what you're experiencing, you start moving in ways that serve the emotion, not your future. That's why most people lash out when angry. They shut down when discouraged. They retreat when anxious, not because they're broken, but because they've never trained to do otherwise. Every emotion becomes a cue to react. But mastery begins the moment you stop reacting and start observing. You feel the emotion. You pause. You breathe. You watch it move through your body like a wave, like wind, like a storm that does not belong to you. It simply moves through you. You don't feed it. You don't follow it. You don't attach to it. You let it pass. And you move with discipline, not emotion. This is why the strongest people you meet are often the calmest. Not because they don't feel, but because they've trained, they've felt everything and still moved forward. They've learned to stop worshipping moods like gods and start treating them like signals, temporary, movable, survivable. They know you don't train for the days you feel good. You train for the days you don't. You train so your habits carry you when your feelings can't. You train so your breath is deeper than your frustration, so your focus is stronger than your sadness, so your vision is clearer than your fear. Because without training, you collapse into whatever mood shows up. And if your moods rule your actions, you live a life ruled by emotion, not by intention. And intention is where real progress lives. That's what separates the grounded from the unstable. It's not that grounded men don't feel. It's that they choose how to feel. They notice their state. They observe the pattern. They name it, but they don't let it drive the car. Emotion sits in the passenger seat. Discipline drives. Every time. This is how your mission survives. This is how your goals remain intact. Not because your moods don't shift, but because your standards don't. When you feel unmotivated, you still train. When you feel discouraged, you still show up. When you feel unseen, you still build. That's how you move from emotion to execution. That's how you turn pain into power, not by denying what you feel, but by refusing to be owned by it. Control your mood, or your mood will control your mission. It will convince you to stop when you need to continue. It will whisper limitations into your mind and disguise them as truth. And unless you've trained, you'll believe them. You'll accept the story your emotion offers and trade your progress for comfort. So feel the wave, but don't ride it blindly. Let it move, but don't let it move you off course. You are not the storm. You are the sky it passes through. Still, wide, unmoved. Control your money, or it will own your life. This isn't just about wealth. It's about direction. It's about power. Because money, whether you like it or not, is tied to your decisions, your emotions, your time, and your future. And most people are not broke because they don't earn enough. They're broke because they lack structure. They lack clarity. They lack the awareness to connect their habits to their consequences. So they live in a loop, working hard just to keep up with the damage they keep doing to themselves. They think more income will solve everything. But income without discipline is just fuel for a faster crash. They spend to feel better. They spend to numb stress, anxiety, boredom. A dopamine hit here, a new gadget there. A swipe, a tap, a package at the door, and the illusion of progress. But it's not progress, it's avoidance. They spend to escape their reality, not to invest in a better one. And worse, they spend without knowing why. They don't track, they don't pause, they don't ask, does this align with the life I say I want? and so their days are filled with short bursts of pleasure that cost them years of freedom. Not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because you cannot build peace if you are always in financial survival mode. Money, like energy, must be directed. Every dollar is a decision. Every purchase is a statement of values. When you spend unconsciously, you live unconsciously. You give your future away, one transaction at a time. Every impulse buy is a moment of undisciplined emotion. Every untracked expense is a crack in your foundation. And yes, it adds up, not just in your bank account, but in your life trajectory. Because a man who cannot master his money cannot master his time, and a man who cannot master his time will never master his mission. If you can't delay pleasure, you'll never earn peace. That's the law. Peace doesn't come from comfort. It comes from control. Control over your habits. Control over your emotions. Control over your priorities. If you can't resist what feels good now, you will always sacrifice what matters most later. That's why the discipline to say no to something small now is not loss, it's leadership. Leadership over your future. Leadership over your path. Leadership over your freedom. Start with awareness, not obsession. Start tracking every dollar, not to become rigid, but to become awake. You cannot change what you won't confront. You cannot grow what you do not measure. When you track your money, you begin to see your patterns. You begin to see how often you buy because you're tired or stressed or bored, not because it makes sense. And once you see those patterns, you can start to shift them. Slowly, intentionally. You begin to allocate money toward growth instead of decay. You begin to buy tools, not toys. Investments, not distractions. Systems, not escapes. Because money doesn't change people, it reveals them. It reveals your emotional maturity. It reveals your values. It reveals whether you're building or reacting, whether you're leading or coping, whether you're living with intention or waiting for a bailout. The man who controls his finances doesn't just accumulate wealth. He builds freedom. He buys his time back. He moves through the world with less anxiety, less dependence, less desperation. And because he doesn't need money from everyone, he doesn't need validation from everyone either. He becomes harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to knock off course. Because his decisions aren't made from lack, they're made from clarity. And clarity is the beginning of power. So track your money, master your budget, audit your spending. Not because you're greedy, but because you're done being owned. You want freedom, earn it. By controlling the very thing the world uses to control you. Control your mind or be a slave forever. That's not poetic. That's not abstract. That's reality. This is the final truth. The deepest layer of personal transformation. You can't control your mouth, your emotions, your reactions, your money, your direction if your mind is chaotic. And right now, most people's minds are. They don't govern their thoughts, they get dragged by them. Their heads are loud from the moment they wake up, spinning, overthinking, regretting the past, imagining problems in the future, trying to calculate who likes them, who doesn't, wondering what to say next, what to buy, what to post, what to avoid. It's non-stop. And because they never stop to observe what's actually happening, they begin to believe that this mental noise is them, that these thoughts are who they are. But they're not. They're habits. They're untrained patterns. And if you don't train those patterns, you become them. Most people live in permanent mental reaction. Their minds jump from regret to fantasy, from fear to ego, from distraction to desire. One scroll, one text, one headline, and they're emotionally hijacked. This weakens their attention. This drains their focus. And without focus, no meaningful work gets done. Without clarity, no decisions are made cleanly. And when your thoughts are untamed, your direction becomes unanchored. That's why most people aren't lazy, they're mentally scattered. They're stuck in mental loops, convincing themselves they're stuck in life. But they're not stuck in life. They're stuck in thought. And until that loop is broken, no amount of external change will fix anything. The untrained mind is dangerous. It ruins relationships because it projects insecurities, assumes the worst, and overthinks every interaction. It sabotages discipline because it looks for escape, for comfort, for anything but the hard thing. It destroys peace because it never sits still. It drags you through imaginary conversations, exaggerated fears, old wounds, and false narratives. And if you never interrupt that, it becomes your identity. It becomes your behavior. It becomes your entire life. So how do you control the mind? You sit with it, not once, not when it's convenient, but every single day. You carve out time, not for entertainment, not for stimulation, but for stillness. You sit, you breathe, you observe, you stop running from your own thoughts and start looking at them, not judging them, not reacting to them, just seeing them as patterns, as tendencies, as echoes of past experience. And in that seeing, you begin the shift. You begin to create space between who you are and what you think. That space is your freedom. That's the moment your thoughts lose control over you, because now you can see them for what they are: temporary, movable, shapeable. You begin to give your mind structure. You feed it with focus, with repetition, with clarity. You stop giving it garbage, the useless drama, the cheap dopamine, the constant opinions. You remove the junk food of thought and replace it with practice. That's what this is: not a motivational idea, but a training system. Every single time you choose silence over noise, attention over reaction, intention over impulse, you are training your mind. And over time, what used to control you becomes quiet, not numb but precise, focused, clean. And once you control your mind, you control everything else. You speak with intention. You respond instead of react. You move with clarity. Your finances improve, not because you earned more, but because you made smarter choices. Your relationships improve, not because you found the perfect person, but because you're no longer projecting your chaos onto them. You stop chasing peace because you've become it. Everything in your external world begins to shift, not because the world changed, but because your filter changed. Your decisions changed. Your energy changed. Control your mind, or it will control you. It will own your time, your attention, your reactions, your relationships, and your entire path. But when you take that power back, when you sit down and meet yourself every day with full awareness and discipline, that's when the real transformation begins. And from there, you become unstoppable. Control your words, control your emotions, control your money, and above all, control your mind. This is the real foundation of freedom, not external success, not temporary motivation, not attention or approval. Structure, internal structure, the kind that no one sees but everyone feels when you walk into a room, the kind that governs your decisions when no one's watching, the kind that makes you reliable not just to others, but to yourself. If you build that structure brick by brick, hour by hour, day by day, you'll feel something most men never taste: peace without weakness, power without chaos, stillness without detachment. But if you ignore it, if you keep avoiding that work, life will feel random, heavy, confusing, unfair. You'll keep wondering why you're stuck, why your progress disappears, why your mind always feels like a battlefield. But it's not life that's against you, it's the lack of structure within you. You can't hold a strong outer life with a weak inner frame. Without control of your speech, you'll ruin relationships. Without control of your emotions, you'll collapse in pressure. Without control of your money, you'll trade your freedom for pleasure. And without control of your mind, you'll never be able to hear your own direction through the noise of the world. Start now, not next month, not when it feels easier. Now, build the ritual. 1 hour a day, every day. This is where real change begins, not in massive, loud effort, but in sacred repetition. In a small block of time you give to yourself. Time with no distractions, just silence, focus, reflection. No phone, no noise, just breathe, just structure. You move your body. You sit with your thoughts. You write what matters. You face what you've been avoiding. You ask yourself better questions. And you do it again tomorrow. And again the next day. Not because you feel like it, but because the man you want to become requires it. Train like your life depends on it, because it does. Everything you want, peace, purpose, power, presence, is on the other side of this structure. And if you're reading this right now, it's not new information. It's a reminder of what you already know. Deep down, you've always known you needed to take this hour seriously, that you couldn't keep living on autopilot, that you couldn't keep giving your time, attention, and energy to everyone else while leaving yourself with scraps. This is your call to return to discipline, not as punishment, but as alignment. Not to restrict your life, but to build one that can finally expand. If this message stirred something in you, subscribe. Stay connected to the frequency that reminds you who you really are. Not the version they want you to be, but the one you're building hour by hour. And if you're serious about taking this discipline into your daily routine, check the link below. This isn't motivation. This is structure, the only thing that lasts. And remember this: the man who controls his inner world, his words, his thoughts, his energy, his money, doesn't need to control anyone else, because he already controls his destiny.